They thought no one would defend the girl in the wheelchair until the sound of engines shook the diner. The morning sun spilled across the windows of Redwood Diner, a roadside spot in small-town Ohio where the smell of sizzling bacon and warm syrup usually promised comfort. But that Thursday morning, the familiar hum of forks on plates couldn't mask the cruelty about to unfold. At a booth by the window sat Emily Parker, a 12-year-old girl with chestnut hair neatly tucked behind her ears. Born with a spinal condition, Emily had never walked without her wheelchair. She was used to the stares, the pitying smiles, the whispered remarks that followed her everywhere. But she had learned to hold her head high, clinging to the quiet strength her parents had always told her she carried. That morning, she was simply trying to enjoy her pancakes, her plate a small shield between her and the world. Then came the laughter. At the next booth sat 3 teenage boys, Travis, Dylan, and Cole, their voices loud enough for the entire diner to hear. At first, they only snickered, but then Travis leaned over, slapped Emily's plate off her lap, and sent her pancakes splattering across the floor. Syrup ran across the tiles in messy streaks as Dylan shoved her wheelchair just hard enough to jolt her forward. Cole cackled as if it were the funniest thing he'd ever seen. The diner froze. The sharp clatter of the plate on the floor seemed to echo against the chrome and glass. A waitress carrying a tray of steaming mugs stopped dead, her eyes wide. A couple at the counter frowned but kept their heads down. Emily's cheeks burned as tears welled in her eyes. She bent forward, trying desperately to gather her ruined food with trembling hands, humiliated beyond words. That was when another hand reached down. Not rough, not mocking, gentle. An older man with silver hair bent beside her, quietly setting the plate back on the table. "Don't pay them any mind," he whispered, though his uneasy glance at the boys betrayed his own fear. His kindness was a candle in the dark, but it wasn't enough to chase away the sting of laughter still echoing from the booth behind her. Emily's throat tightened. She wished she could disappear. Minutes passed like hours, and then it happened, the moment that would change everything. A low rumble, faint at first, began to grow louder. It sounded like thunder rolling over the hills. Forks stopped midair. Conversation stilled. The ground seemed to shake as the sound grew closer, until through the diner's wide windows, rows of motorcycles rolled into the parking lot, chrome gleaming in the morning light. Their engines roared like an approaching storm. Emily's heart skipped. The 3 boys stiffened. Their smirks faltered. Everyone in that diner knew what those jackets meant. The bell over the door jingled softly as the first man walked in. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a beard flecked with gray and a gaze as sharp as steel. His name was Jack Bear Dalton, leader of the local motorcycle club. Behind him came more riders, Hank, Miguel, Reed, and others, their presence filling the small diner until it seemed to shrink around them. The air felt charged, tense. Jack's eyes scanned the room, pausing briefly on the waitress, the couple, then finally landing on Emily. His expression softened instantly. He stepped closer, boots heavy against the tile, and knelt beside her until he was eye level. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked, his rough voice carrying surprising gentleness. Emily nodded, though her eyes shimmered with tears she hadn't yet shed. For the first time that morning, she didn't feel small. She felt protected. Jack slowly turned his head toward the boys. His voice dropped low, steady, but every word cut through the silence. "You think you're tough, picking on a girl in a wheelchair?" Travis swallowed hard. Dylan shifted uncomfortably. Cole's smirk vanished as his face turned pale. The bravado that had filled the diner minutes earlier melted into shame. They slid out of their booth one by one, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. Not one dared look at Emily again as they stumbled toward the door. Outside, the motorcycles formed a wall of steel and leather, their engines growling like sentinels. The boys hurried past, stripped of their arrogance, fleeing into the distance. Inside, Jack turned back to Emily. He called the waitress over, pulled a thick wad of bills from his vest pocket, and said firmly, "Bring this young lady anything she wants. Pancakes, pie, milkshake, the whole menu if she likes." The waitress smiled through tears, nodding quickly. Then, in a gesture no one in that diner would ever forget, Jack unfastened his leather vest, heavy with patches that marked years of loyalty and battles. He draped it gently across Emily's shoulders. "Your family now," he told her, his voice softer than anyone expected from a man like him. Emily's tears spilled freely, but they weren't from humiliation anymore. They were tears of gratitude. For the first time in a long time, she felt visible, not as a burden, not as someone to be pitied, but as someone worth protecting. The diner erupted in quiet applause. A woman at the counter dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. The waitress leaned down to hug Emily, promising her she'd never again sit in that diner feeling invisible. And Emily knew, deep down, that the moment would stay with her forever. She realized that cruelty will always exist, but so will courage. Sometimes, the fiercest-looking people carry the gentlest hearts. And sometimes strangers, unexpected, unlikely strangers, step in to rewrite the ending of your story. If this story moved you, remember, when you see cruelty, don't stay silent. Be the one who chooses kindness, because the courage to act can change someone's life forever.